All right, hello guys. Yeah, so we're gonna look at some interesting end games that were recently played in some tournaments that were actually theoretical end games. And so let's start off with um Marker Zheng against Harshan Reddy. So its position is white to move. Sorry, black to move. So this is going this way. Um, so black has to try to stop this pawn. So how should we try to go about doing that? So black to move here. Mm. Right. So black to play, there's only one way to make a draw. Okay. Give you guys a few minutes to think. There's actually several mistakes happened in this game. Mhm. Okay. So far, the moves we see are Rook H3, Rook B8, King F6. Any other candidates? To give you a few more minutes. Interesting. Jazz. All right, so let's look at Rook B8 first. I think a lot of people know the frontal defense, which is very good. Yeah, obviously, frontal defense is like one of the more common defenses after the Philidor, right? The Philidor is the most common defense, right? I think the easiest one. But I assume here almost everyone probably should know the Philidor, um, where the rook is cutting the king off on the sixth rank, and the white king is like on a five, and the king is like, but the king would have to like be able to be blocking the pawn. But here the black king is like very far away, right? So obviously the Philidor defense won't work. Now the frontal defense, it can work potentially because the pawn hasn't crossed the fifth rank yet. However, in this case, rook b8, king b3, king of, let's say, king f6. Um, why will this not work for black? How can white win this position? Yeah, exactly. We go rook e2, we cut off the king, and then the king is going to be too far away, right? Like, let's say after something like this, white will go for this winning plan. Uh, the king diagonal to the queening square, um, and to the pawn, um, two squares apart diagonally. And after this, we can go to b2, and the pawn is unstoppable, right? We could see, yeah. So that will not work for black. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so let's see what other possibilities you okay, so rook h3 was mentioned, but yeah, then I think rook c3, king b3 doesn't really help. We're not able to really cut off the king. Um, let's see what other moves have been mentioned. King f6, rook b8. Yeah, so king f6, a very common suggestion. That would have been the correct move. So if b5, we can play what move? Yeah, exactly. We can play rook h5. Rook h5, rook b5. Um, that would be the idea. So white has to play something like rook e2, right, to try to cut off the king. So it looks like it's probably lost anyway. But it turned out not to be lost. How can black play here? So rook h5 I don't think works because king here, king there, then b5. I don't think we can really stop the invasion. Um, oh, scroll up, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Um, so, but rook h3 we can play, right? And we cut off the king now. Now there's no rook c3. And after this, we can go here, right? And that's like one of the differences, right? Like if the king was on f5, this would not work, right? Because they can push the pawn. Now, this position would have been a draw. After rook e2, they can also try b5, but then here, no, sorry, no, here. And if king b3, we bring the king in closer, and then here we do the frontal defense, rook b8, and then here they cannot get to d6, right? That's the difference. And as you could see, it's a draw. So king f6 would have made a draw in the game. Um, instead of that, black played king f5. Um, after king f5, how should white continue in this position? Yeah, so here the answer is actually rook c6. We can cut off the king like that. That's the other problem. This was actually missed in the game. White played king b3. So they should have played rook c6. And after rook h3, now you can play rook c3. Now you can cut off the king like that. And this is winning. Um, Instead of that, the move was missed. And white played king b3. How do we now make a draw here? With block. So don't just give one move. Give a little bit more a follow-up. Like, what do you think white will play? What do you think white's idea could be? And then how do you play after that? So yeah, I think people are getting it. Yeah, king e6 is correct. And the follow-up is after b7, you have king d7. And then the important thing is rook c8, right? That is the big point here. And that's like one big idea. Like otherwise, normally you're gonna lose if the pawn reaches the fifth rank, right? Unless you can force a rook exchange, a favorable rook exchange, where if they trade, it's a draw, and if they don't, they're gonna abandon, and then from here you get a pretty easy draw, right? Like, well, here you have a passive defense, right? Because this is a B pawn, right? If let's say they played, if this would have also been a Philidor defense, right? Which I'm sure everyone knows. Yeah, if you go here, then rook goes all the way back. So, but yeah, here you don't even need the Philidor. You can just do the back right defense because it's with an H or a G pawn, or with a rook or a bit or rook or a knight pawn, it works. So, but this is the only drawing sequence. King e6, then king d7, and then, well, here you can go here, but if king b4, you must find rook c8, right? Otherwise, you lose the game. So white could also have tried rook d2, but then the important thing is now you go rook b8, and now once again you get a frontal defense. So black played king e5. So mistake. And as you could see, these are good players here. Marcus, Zhang, and against Reddy. They're both like, around master level, right? But it's not easy. All right, so how should white continue. That's why it's important to study your endgame. I think USCF. Yeah, I think it's USCF. But even still, we're talking about master level players, not playing endgames fluently, right? Yeah, so here B5 looks good. And yeah, B5 is definitely working here. Yeah, black is not in time to go to C8, right? Here, 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 you get here. Here you have rook C5, which is a key resource you didn't have there because with the pawn on B5 you had king C7. But here you're just losing, right? Um, so yeah, king A5 is probably easier. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. King F5 is even easier. Yeah, you're just gonna get a Lucina position. Whereas B6, you sort of have to calculate, right? Uh so another rook C6 also would have technically worked. Like after this, you go B5. Um okay, so B5, rook H4, good question. Who wants to answer that? No, I don't think rook C4. I take king D6. It's that's would not have worked. So I gotta be careful. So yeah, let's try to actually. That's a very good question. I think rook c6, king d5. I also don't think it like fully works. Okay, so yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, b6. Um, I think that works. Yeah, rook d2. Yeah, rook d2 might also work, but then rook g4, you have to still find maybe the same idea. So b6. Rook h6. The only try, right? And then here, here, and then here. And if here, then yeah, here. So rook c5 you have, right? That's the key resource. And white is winning. If you play rook d2 after rook g4, let's say here. Oh, I guess, oh yeah, you can go b6 here. Yeah, you can also do it like that. Yeah, that seems pretty simple. Get the king away from checks and white is winning. Alrighty. So, uh, yeah. So anyway, so in the game, white played rook c5. Bad move, right? So far in this one endgame, we can count every move in the beginning was a mistake, right? King f5 was a mistake. Blew the draw, right? Not, and again, not to pick on these players, but it just goes to show endgames are hard, right? That's why if you study them well, it's going to be a big advantage, right? Because most of the time endgames will be played in time pressure, right? So it's like if you can get fluent in endgames, that's going to be a big advantage, right? Deeper in the game. And you'll feel more comfortable like playing out like positions. Um, oh, Marcus wasn't class few times? Yeah, possibly, yeah. I remember, I think. So far, if you look at it, king f5 mistake, king b3 mistake and reply, right? Uh, then king e5 mistake, and now rook c5 mistake, right? So the first four moves, all mistakes, right? It just goes to show endgames are hard, right? When masters are making mistakes left and right. Uh, Black played king d6. That's finally not a mistake. King c4. And well, this position is a draw. But black still lost this. So the question is, how would you try to draw this position. Yeah, so I think most people got it. Yeah, rook a8 is fine, right? And then here. This move I already kind of don't like. I think he should have just like waited on the eighth rank. And then if here, you just have an easy frontal defense. No progress. And there's nothing, and you cannot here go here, obviously. Right? And then if the rook moves, then king c6. Right? So that would have been a pretty easy fortress, right? Uh with almost any rook move. But not this one though. Because if we go here immediately, we deprive ourselves of rook h4 check, right? Which is very important. So rook h7 was played. Now it's a tricky move, hoping for b5, rook h4. Well, even rook c7 is a draw, but rook h4 wins. But now king b5, right? And now you have to be a bit careful because the rook is missing checking squares. And now we made our life quite hard, much harder. How should we draw here? Yes, you have to play rook b8, yeah. And it's still a little tricky because here you have to find so basically in the game this happened. Rook b8 did happen. Only move, right? But now how to make the draw here? Yes, it's rook b8, yeah. It would not work to go rook a4 because of king b7 check and yeah. But we could go rook b8, uh king here, check here, and now we go here. And then this is a draw. Now you have to find king d5 and then king c5. If you go here, you do lose the game. Slowly but surely. So you have to be still very accurate, but it's not like the most difficult. But interestingly, if you play here first, it loses because you're in a Zugzwang, I think. That's the problem. Here I can untangle. here I can untangle with rook, rook b6, I think, or even this. You can untangle like that. So you must go here. Yeah, you must give check first and only play that here. So that if this, you can go rook a8. It's a little tricky, right? But anyway, that would have been a draw. Um, but let's see what black played. So in the game, it was king c4, here, here, here. And he played rook f8. And then, of course, king invaded. And white just was able to win with the Lucina position. He didn't even need Lucina position in the game, but yeah. So pretty definitely not mistake free, but as you could see, a very instructive game. All right, the next one I want to take a look at is the game between Vaishali and Harika in this Indian tournament. It started off with like 2 against 1. And how should we play in this position with white? I think rook a1, in my opinion, is the easiest. I don't really see like a big chance after rook a1. Um, at least if for rook h1, they could try a5, right? Which is what I don't like as much. And if we play here, then here, here. I guess this is also okay. Yeah, and then if they go rook d1. Yeah, I guess this is all right also. Um, so instead, like they played rook h1, black played a5, takes, and here white played rook a1 check. So for now, white is holding this pretty well, right? Preventing black from playing b4. Yeah, it's a little surprising, yeah. Rook d8. Okay, what would you play with white here? Yeah, I think king e4 is a little easier, although I think both. Well, actually, no, king e2 would lose. Because the thing is, like, then I can play rook d5, right? I was, for a second, I thought maybe because it's the b pawn, maybe it doesn't. But yeah, you actually must go king e4, which white did play, to her credit. Because if you go king e2, there's rook d5. And then after king e3, king c5, check, there's like king c3, right? And you can like defend this pawn, right? And yeah, if you go here, it's like here, and then you try to go like this before b3 and things like that. So that's kind of the point. So king e4 is a bit better. All right, rook d2. Um, king e3, um, rook d5, but now you have king e4, right? So you have chance to push them back. King c5, white played here, and now what should white do here? It was a 30-second increment, so there's G9 classical time control. Yes, they were in time pressure, but now Vaishali has like 5 minutes. But for some reason, white played this, which is like insane. She did like all the hard parts early hard, but then, she did this overthought. She spent like over a minute and overthought this. I don't really know what kind of goals she saw. Possibly she thought that she's gonna be able to go here, but she clearly has miscalculated, right? Because after this, you're not able to, you know, it's clearly losing, right? So white played here. And now, okay, I think that what black did is fine, obviously, but in my opinion, king a3 is like by far the easiest way to make to win. But which is what black did play that here. And now, okay, I would probably just in this position, I would just go king b1, b2, right? And then do the Lucina position. But black instead went for this, which they calculated that it's winning. But like to me, it's like it feels like unnecessary to even like calculate this when you can play king b1, b2 and just like do the Lucina position like automatically, right? But for some reason, yeah, she went for this. But like, what if you miscalculate? Of course, in this case, she didn't miscalculate it. It's winning, but it just felt very unnecessary. So sometimes that's the thing with Indian players. They calculate a lot, right? But sometimes it's like these kind of positions you don't really calculate, right? It's more like just, you know, you have to try to, follow your knowledge, right? So I think that's like pretty important. And I have like a bunch of other examples on frontal defense, but I've realized that there are players who've seen it before, so I will probably skip them then, and I'll do some other examples, not just related to frontal defense. But obviously, frontal defense is a very important one to be aware of. Okay, so this one is black to play. What should we do here as black? How to hold this? Give you guys a few minutes. Okay, so I could see this as a pretty tough one. So maybe a few more minutes. This is like legit tough. So King of Seven, guys. It's a correct move. The only move. Um, yeah, it's pretty hard. So I've seen Rook takes H3 mentioned. Yeah, of course Rook takes H3 loses because of this. Right? That's easy enough. Uh Rook E6 was played in the game. That also loses pretty easily. The black is not. First of all, you can play Rook B4, cut off the king, right? The easiest, but even what white did is easily winning. So Rook E8 also doesn't work because of this and this. And again, Rook B4. So I guess it's mainly between yeah, you can also consider Rook C3. But then Rook C5 doesn't help. Rook D3, you go Rook D5. That doesn't help very much. So yeah, the best move is King of 7. Now, if you go King of 6, the problem is like Rook D5. King E6. So if King of 7, Rook D5, you have King E8. Uh, that's like 1 point, right? But if you go here, now like it's very hard to stop the promotion. And even though you can eventually get back, well, like this position is winning. It's a little tricky, but it is winning. So that's kind of the point, yeah. So King of 7, Rook D5, King E8 doesn't work, and you're giving up this pawn, but then you have this incredible move King E6. And then you're threatening Rook D3 and or Rook C3. And then you're able to hold this. Yeah, King of 7 and Rook takes H3. I think you lose this game. Rook, so here. And now what? After D7. Check here. Check. Yeah, the king gets in here. And Yeah, looks like it's winning. Yeah. I don't even think it's going to be queen against rook, but maybe. But yeah, king e6 is key. Yeah. And rook b7 also doesn't work. King e8. And then here you have a million checks, one after another. Yeah. So it's a this one is like legit pretty hard. Um, so yeah. Um, the next one was kind of like more of a simple mistake that was mentioned. Wait, there was a question on the previous one. Hold on. What if wait, what if king d7? Here you mean? Uh, well, wait. Yeah, I think rook takes h3 or even h6. So I don't think that fully works. All right, so I'll leave the next one. So here in this position, white played rook g4. Should we trade into pawn endgame, or should we keep rooks on the board, hoping to milk 2 against 1? Yeah, rook g4 did not make practical sense. Yeah, I agree. Because it has no upside, right? Like if it's blunt, you have to calculate extra headache. King and pawn endgame, you might blunder, but like the down, there's no upside, right? Because you can always go rook h6 and then the game continues. So yeah, I agree. That decision white should have never made, so but they did it, and now we have to make a decision. Yeah, black is definitely winning. Yeah. So that's a pretty simple one. There was another one. Um, so how would you try to defend this with black? Yeah, so many moves are okay. King d5, pretty much any move is okay, but just don't do this, yeah, because this. And even though the black king is active, there's a outside pass one, and white wins. Yeah, they did. Um, so Irene Fey, she had a pretty good tournament, and there was another game where she got a bit fortunate. It's where she was losing but saved. What should white play? So this one I noticed that a lot of people are giving rook d5, but rook d5 also doesn't work because then I go king f4, and after this move I can just bring the rook back to a8, and then black is gonna have enough counterplay, right? And king a6 was the move that was played, but then after king f4, it was well, anyway, we'll see that shortly, yeah. But the move was rook d4. Um, and after h5, you go rook b4. And then king here, here, and then yeah, of course we're winning because the king is cut off. So after king a6 here, rook d3, h5, hg3. Yeah, it was a little bit of a mistake. This would have given the better chance because black would have had to find only this and then only g3. And now white can try this rook c1. And then apparently this endgame is maybe a draw. But either way, yeah, tricky. Um, I actually, speaking of Ted, I do have a game from Ted. So, how should white um hold this? Since you guys are talking about Ted a lot, I remembered I have a game from Ted also. Yeah, so I think king d3 or king f5 are both okay. You have to sort of prevent rook c2. You cannot let the rook invade. After the rook invades, it's a big problem for white, right? White was a good player, as you could see. 2000, right? But yeah. It's, um there's also a game Ginsburg against Ruth. This was from the seniors. And this was pretty interesting. So in this position, um white's sort of like pressing here, right? Now black should have gone king f6. And the defensive idea is very similar to what we've seen like in some other earlier puzzle. Here, king e6. And black gets counterplay in this line. So also, against the side pawn, the king gets in, the king is cut off. What do we have like counter on the side? Checks. Yeah, I mean, it happens. Well, I mean, he's black and, you know, 25 against 23, it's not that surprising. I mean, could happen. Happens like 25% of the time. 2300 is expected to score 25% against 2500. So black played here, which is less accurate. King b4, probably I guess rook b4 is a better try. Um, and then so this check here, rook a3. And how should black defend this? Well, Yermolinsky is recovering from an ailment, so um and Christensen played the US seniors, so I don't think he wanted to play two tournaments. And Gulko, I don't think plays chess anymore. He's very old, and I think he's not playing anymore. I don't even know if he lives in US anymore. So, all right, so black to play. What should we do here? Yeah, so rook b3 was played, but then king c5, and then here white might be winning. Even after king a4, it's winning after g5. And then the pawn is very weak on g6, and there's like ideas of the king invading. So black must play h takes, and then they can play rook f3 or rook e3, check from the side. And then we don't, and then we have a draw like that. They have to go here, but this is still a draw. Looks like it might not be a draw, but it is a draw. So, I guess the best chance is to go here. But yeah, black's fine. All right. Well, hopefully, yeah, you liked these examples. I especially like the first ones. I would have shown some more theoretical examples, but then I remembered that there's a couple of you that I think already know these examples, so I decided to not show them. But I figured I'll stick to course and just show the ones from the recent tournaments. So hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next week. Bye bye, everyone.